The stars still shine in the nightly sky, and we watch the moon set tonight. Because tonight, we watch the finale of Moon Knight. The completion and the ending of this show that I've loved so dearly so far, and I've gotten a kick out of it. The finale is now here. The 6th and final episode of Moon Knight is out. And here I am watching it. And that's probably why you clicked on this video in the first place. So here's your warning. This will be a spoiler review and thoughts of episode 6, the finale of Moon Knight. If you haven't seen the show or this episode, go watch it. And if you want, my videos are also up on the channel already, covering each episode. But without further ado, let's sit back, relax, and watch this finale. And hope it turns out in the best. Not only for the show, but for our main character as well. I have high hopes. Let's go! Holy shit! Holy shit! They did the thing! They did the thing at the end! Alright, I don't know where to start. Holy shit! Alright. I might just be biased because it just came out and I literally just watched it and now I'm recording this. But regardless, I love this episode. I love this show entirely. I'm so glad Moon Knight is now a core character, and I love that he's now cemented into the MCU and he's just a character and he's more popular now as well because of this. I love it all. But this episode in particular, because that's what this video is about, I have a lot to talk about. So let me think of what to talk about first, and then we'll get into it. Alright, let's talk about it. I calmed down a bit, I simmered down a little bit, so now I have to talk about it without getting too hyper and acting like I have ADHD. So, where to start first? We'll go in the order of what happens in the episode. A lot of things happen in this, so there's a lot to talk about. It's probably going to be a long video, apologies, but I hope you like it, I hope you enjoy it regardless. But first, one thing before we get into this, I want to say, I forget what video it was, but early on in this Moon Knight series I'm talking about, the episodes, I said that in the last episode, we're going to have a kaiju monster movie fight. Completely joking between Amit and Khonshu, if Amit would even be around, because I didn't know. It was 3 or 4 maybe, or even earlier than that. I was joking about it. I said it's going to be a monster movie. And this episode was exactly that. I guessed it. Maybe that's why I'm so hyper about it. That's why I'm so excited, because I was right about it. Or that's why I was at first. But I was right. I completely guessed it off of just a fun little guess. And that's just fun to me. I tend to talk about and ramble on a lot about these type of things, and when I like them. And that's why most of them get longer and longer as the discussions have went on the channel. But this episode overall, I loved it. I did enjoy it. I do feel a lot of it is rushed. Maybe not a lot of it, but some of it does feel rushed because they need to put it in as the finale, and they need to get it in there. So some stuff is a little rushed here and there, but for the most part, I think it was a good finale. It did exactly what a finale should do, and it concluded the show and the story going on in this particular series. There's a lot of things that they could have done wrong, which I do think they did a lot of it right. Like I said, I do feel some of it is rushed, which is fine, unless the only way they could have really fixed that is if it was stretched out, it was longer, or more episodes. But they did put it on one episode as the finale, and it did its job as the finale. And I think it was a damn good episode. I did enjoy it thoroughly. There's a lot of directions they could have taken this episode with, and a lot of roads they could have went down. And I would be watching it, and I would be thinking in my head oh, is this going to happen? Please don't do this. Please don't do that. And they didn't. They went out with a different approach, which is probably the better approach that I was thinking of. Or I wouldn't think of it, but it would still be the better approach. Better than what I would think as the worst outcome, if that makes sense. A lot of things would happen, and I'd be please don't go down this road, and they wouldn't. And they ended up being good. And the episode went, ongoing, and until it reached the end. Which concluded the episode, and what I think, like I said, was a damn good episode. So basically, with what they set up and how the story was going, and the entire show, how it planned out, and it all came to this specific episode, how it all came down to this finale, I think this was the best approach they could have done. I enjoyed it. I think it was great. I think it was good. It was a good episode and a good finale. I enjoyed it, at least, in my opinion. I think it was pretty good. You may not like it, and that's fine. But for me, I think that they did the best job they could with it, with how the story was going, and I think this was the best approach possible. So, alright, let's talk about the actual events of the episode now. Get ready, because this is probably going to be long, knowing myself. If only I had my own identity or other alter that could talk about things in decent amount of times. But I don't. I'm ghosty, and that's how it is. So, let's get started. Well, firstly, the episode starts off with a recap, of course, like every other episode has been so far, or recent ones at least. And Mark is dead. He's still in the field of reeds, and we don't see that until a few minutes in. But Layla's there, and Harrow, it's like right after Harrow shot him, they move his body and put a scarab on top of him. And actually, I don't even know if that played any importance, the scarab. Unless it did because Layla grabbed it. I might have not have caught that. But at this point, they're going through it, whatever, and Mark is still dead. He hasn't showed up yet. We haven't seen him in the afterlife or anything like that. We haven't seen the asylum or anything. So I thought he was dead. And then a little later, after Harrow actually breaks the statue of Amit and actually releases Amit, which was badass to see, that Amit as an actual figure. And even when they get bigger, no one can see them, remember, because they're still avatars. Or no, the avatars can see them, and everyone under that follows the avatars can see them. So that's why some of Harrow's followers are able to see Amit, but not all the citizens and whatnot. But they can see Harrow's like stick or his cane and whatnot, so that's why they can see that. But it actually like summons Amit, and he actually releases Amit, which is pretty cool. And if someone told me beforehand that we would have a talking hippopotamus and a crocodile in this show, I would not have believed it. But here we are. We'll get more into Amit about later on, but her talking to Harrow and the followers, talking about like justice and whatnot, is like still a big thing in the show. Balance and like your own morals and soul is a big part of this show. Well, at least when it comes to Harrow and the judgment side of things. We see it through the entirety of the show, especially with Mark and how he's balanced as a person. Not only in the balance scale episode, episode 5, not only in that, but we just see him go against himself with whether he's a good person or not. So it's a big part of the show. But we'll get more into Amit later. There's so much things I can comment on in this, but I'm trying to make it like, not an hour-long video. So I'm trying my best. Also, actually, before Harrow even like releases Amit, we see Tawaret, the hippo god, talk to Layla through a dead body, which is freaky. It was funny, but it was really weird to see. Especially how like the corpse was like moving around and talking. I don't know. It's weird. It happens again later in the episode. Actually, wait. It wasn't even that later in the episode. It was like a few minutes after the first time happens. First time happens really early on in the episode when they're on the bridge and they're like driving around when Harrow's outside, and then it happens in the chamber once Harrow kills the gods and he releases Amit. So Layla finds out that she needs to release Khonshu to help Mark. A little later, she does do that exact thing and releases Khonshu. And in this scene, Khonshu tries to persuade, or not even persuade, he's like talking to Layla, trying to get her in the gist of being his avatar, which he denied. Thankfully, that was one thing I was like, oh my god, please don't do it, please don't do it. Because at this point in the episode, it's like 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes in, and we haven't seen Mark at all. So I was thinking, oh my god, don't go down this road, please. Do not do this. I mean, don't make Layla Moon Knight or like the Avatar or whatever. And they didn't. Thank God. Thank Khonshu, at least. And then a little after that, we see Harrow and Amit again, and Amit offers Harrow to be her avatar, and he accepts, which explains why he gets so much power and is so much more stronger throughout the episode. I honestly thought he was going to get his own suit, just like Moon Knight has, or Mark has, and much like Layla has later in the episode, which that too was also awesome. That was really cool to see. And Tawaret talking to Layla through dead bodies actually paid off. Mark was able to get help, and that. Layla getting her own suit and actually becoming Tawaret's avatar, which is pretty dope to see. And her suit was pretty badass. It reminded me of Falcon and Wonder Woman from the 84 movie, but no worries. It was still cool nonetheless. I also just want to add as a side note that I love Amit's design just because I love crocodiles, but that's it. And to no surprise, it's an MCU show, so there's going to be a lot of CGI used. And there is CGI in this, like the gods. Like there's literally like a kaiju fight, like I said before in this episode. Like I was joking about it before and it actually came up. But there's like a legitimate monster fight between gods. And of course Tawaret too. There's a lot of CGI used. And a lot of people are like complaining about it. I think it's fine. I really like how Khonshu looks too. But I don't really think the CGI is that bad. At least not bad enough to complain about. But all of like the mystical abilities that Harrow uses and everyone's souls floating out of their bodies, and all that stuff looks dope. Not only does it just look cool because of the effects and like just watching it, but it looks like it's dangerous. It looks like it's deeper than just physical contact or like physical harm. But I just like when things are just dark. Well, the whole show's been dark so far, but you get the point. And that probably plays a factor of why I like the show so much. But let's get on with it. After all this goes down, we see Mark again, finally, with Tawara in the field of reeds. And he's actually made it. He's in the afterlife, and since he balanced himself out in episode 5, he is now in paradise. And yes, the field of reeds is an actual thing. It's an eternal paradise, kind of like the heaven in Egyptian mythology. I think I said that last episode, but he's here. And this is all new to him, because it's full on, it's all peace. It's something that he's not used to, ever. In person, in reality, in his mind, he's never had full peace. So it's a surprise to him, which is really sad. It's a sad reality for Mark, because that's all he's not used to any of it. He's never had true peace in his life until he's dead, which doesn't even last long because he can't accept death, and he can't accept that Stephen is gone and that his altar is not with him anymore. Because he realizes in this scene that he needed Stephen, that Stephen was not just some illness that he had. He actually needed him since he was a child. Mark straight up tells Stephen that he wouldn't have gotten this far without him, and because of him, he helped himself in so many ways. And he full on says that he was a superpower to Mark. Like, that was his own superpower, was that he was able to have a different version of himself help him out and get through it all that he's been through. It's a very emotional scene, which I'm going to add that Oscar Isaac is an amazing actor. This show really puts him on the table and plays all of his cards. He's a great actor. Everyone in this are great actors, especially Oscar Isaac. He deserves something for this. Same with Ethan Hawke as Arthur Harrow. He's very intimidating. He's a great antagonist, and he's really good as the Doctor too in the asylum scenes, which one's coming up, and we'll get into it later on. But just saying, they're amazing actors, and I really love that they chose Oscar Isaac for Moon Knight. But from the last episode and now this, Mark Spector has finally come to balance himself out, and not because of some balance scale, but just because of dealing with himself and his illness and his alters. He's finally come to accept himself and his disorder. And we see in this episode, it's more than that. He embraces it, in fact, and including even with the fighting scenes, which, by the way, are awesome. The combat in this episode is by far the best fight scenes that we've gotten in this show so far. There's a lot of deeper meanings and poetic things in this show, especially with this scene, because not only last episode did it, but this episode also had Mark in harmony in the field of reeds. He was at full peace, finally. And in this episode, he goes out of his way to leave the field and go back to the dunes to save Stephen. And much like the last episode, he's created his own harmony and accepted his altars, and is now able to accept himself and balance himself out. And now he's able to live out in his own peace and his own harmony by accepting his altars and learning to live with them, and even embracing them now. And might I add, it's done well. We see Mark tell Stephen he's never going to abandon him. After all this time, he's not going to do it. Even after they had their whole conflict, they finally come to peace with each other, and Mark has come to accept himself and his altars. And then we see he places now balanced heart on Stephen's hand, and as one, the doors open and light him up. And you could say in this exact scene, when it lights up and they are together as one, that's when you know they've fully accepted themselves. And Mark has fully accepted himself, regardless of everything that has happened. And that leaves them together as one, and now Mark is whole. And then they come back. And that's just, it's like really poetic. It's such meaning behind it, even though there's no words in it besides Mark's dialogue. But it's still a powerful scene, and I think it's done really well. Everything with Mark and Stephen is done really well in this, I think. And especially with how they handled this, compared to the original core character from the comics of Moon Knight, and how the personalities are. They changed it a bit for their own in the MCU, and it paid off. And a little after this scene, Tawara comes out of nowhere and blocks the sand dunes and the onslaught of sand coming at them, and to let them go through the doors and come back. Shout out to Tawara. She's a real one. But after that, we see that they made it through the doors, and they're back in the memories, and we see them come across the first sight of Khonshu that Mark had when Khonshu brought Mark back to life and first gave him the mission of Moon Knight and really made him become Moon Knight in the first place. And that is exactly how Mark comes back as well. Khonshu reaches out to him, Mark accepts, this time with Steven, and accepts himself as well as the deal with Khonshu, and he comes back to life. And then, of course, sadly, since it's the finale, this is the last, but an also really cool suit-up scene that we've seen before. But it's always cool to see. This kind of looks like it's refreshing. It kind of looks like Mark is adjusting to it, like he doesn't quite remember how it worked in the first place. Or maybe, because he came back to life. I think if I had to come back to life too, I'd have to readjust myself, maybe a little bit. And then, once Mark is back, and now we have Mark and Steven both back, plus our third little identity that we'll get into later. Mark meets back up with Khonshu, and now that Khonshu's finally back, now we again have Mark and Khonshu in person, face to face. Finally, after Khonshu was imprisoned, we can finally see them together again. But this time is different, because now Mark has accepted himself and his alters. So now Mark and Steven are like hand in hand. They both control the body when they want and when the other allows them to. They both work hand in hand. It's like yin and yang kind of thing in one body. And it is perfect. I love it. Because this entire show so far, we've had this conflict between them until last episode. And now this episode, we see them actually getting along and working towards their goal and what they want. Together. The conflict itself between Mark and Steven was great, I think. I enjoyed it really well. Or I enjoyed it and I thought it was really well. Pardon me. But they had this conflict the entire time, and the conflict was written well. I think the conflict was executed great. And now that they're actually working together and they've accepted themselves as one, it's perfect. It's even better now, and they embrace it in this episode, which I loved. They change mid-conversation, they keep switching back and forth now and in the fight later on in the episode. I think it's all done really well, and I love it. I love how they deal with the alters and his DID in this show a lot. Even in previous episodes when we've had the blackout scenes, they were awesome scenes. I love them scenes, but now we don't even need them. Well, besides the one in this episode. With Steven and Mark, we don't need them because they get along so comfortably now, and they get along well. So we don't even need the blackout scenes, and we just see them switching personalities left and right. Which, by the way, Oscar Isaac needs something for this. He does such a phenomenal job in this show, acting-wise. Yeah, I'm so glad they chose Oscar Isaac. He's a great actor, and I wouldn't want anyone else playing Moon Knight. Or Mark Spector. Or Stephen Grant. Or, we'll get into that later. But yeah, it's just a great sight to see them finally getting along, and we're actually working together. As good as the conflict was, and how much I enjoyed it, this was just as good, if not even better. Seeing them get along finally after all this time is really refreshing, and it's great to see. And it makes for great scenes, and it betters the character as a whole. So, of course, it's a plus. Alright, well, I spent way too much time on that part, so let's move on in the episode. After that chat, and after the thing happens with Layla and the body of the Avatar that Harold killed, he also talked to Layla. I don't know if I mentioned that yet, but if you've seen the episode, you know what happens. It's also freaky. But we get a badass scene of Moon Knight flying over with a cape, which is awesome. It looks so cool. And then he ends up at his destination, and he uses his staff, which judges people, which also looks cooler, because it's a crocodile now, to judge people within miles of a radius when he strikes down the pyramid. And then we see all these souls floating up of those who were judged in badly terms, and they all go towards Amit, and Amit feeds off these souls, which is awesome. This is where my joke went farther than I thought, because I thought it was actually going to happen. Before, the joke I said was that, it's going to be a monster movie fight kind of thing between Khonshu and Amit. And it was right. That's exactly what happens. But she started getting bigger and bigger as she was consuming these souls, and it really looked like it was going to turn into a kaiju movie. A big-ass monster fight. Which it did happen. And was I surprised? Kind of, but not really, because I was joking, and it looked like that's what the direction they were taking it. And we had a full-on brawl between Khonshu and Amit. But we're not exactly there yet. We finished that awesome flying scene with Moon Knight coming in, and that is when we see finally the showdown between Moon Knight and Arthur Harrow, the avatar of Khonshu and the avatar of Amit. It even gives us a pretty badass slow-mo scene where Moon Knight, the first strike is like thrown, is that he knees Hera right in his chin, right in his jaw. Also, I'm not sure if I mentioned this already, but this is when Layla, or a little bit before this, is when Layla gets her suit, when she becomes the avatar of Tawaret and gets a suit. Looks pretty cool. But I already talked about that. But this is where the fight ends up going downwards into the city. Moon Knight versus Harrow. We finally get the showdown. And this is probably where the combat and the fight scenes excel in this show. Because this scene is awesome. We get Moon Knight. Well, first Harrow sends like his goons after Moon Knight, whatever. And then Moon Knight, like, he obviously is fighting them all off. But he switches personalities between Moon Knight and Mr. Knight. Like, between Mark and Steven. So we get this fight scene of Moon Knight switching to Mr. Knight and back to Moon Knight, back and forth as they're fighting. And it's one of the coolest scenes in this entire episode, or in the entire show. At least when it comes down to fighting, at least. And while all of this is happening, of course we see, like I said, like I thought I was going to joke about, but it actually happened. We have this monster movie, kaiju kind of fight going on behind us with Khonshu and Amit going at it. I don't think anyone can see them because only the avatars and the avatars' followers can see them. Like those who are like under the gods, those who follow the gods can see them. But we have this big fight going on between Khonshu and Amit, and it's awesome. I really did not expect this to happen. I was only joking about it, but it happened, and it ended up pretty cool. Not gonna lie, Khonshu's getting his ass beat a bit here and there. I kind of wish he had more flair in the fight. You know, he had some cool parts. But, you know, I'm not going to nitpick about that. But there was some cool things with him using a staff. Like holding Amit back. I don't know. The fight's cool. Layla's even in here. It's some, like, endgame shit. Well, not endgame shit, but, like, all the characters that we know and have been leading up to the moment are all here. And they're all fighting in one big scene. It's not too endgamey to the point where it's, like, fan service. It still makes sense and it's still good for the episode. Good for the story. But even Layla's here. And she's got her suit on. She's kicking ass. Moon Knight's kicking ass. Mr. Knight is kicking ass. Mark and Steven are working together to kick ass, and it's awesome. This is like one of the things that I've wanted to see. Wasn't sure if they were going to do, and it's here, and I'm so glad to see it. One thing in particular, though, now that I'm thinking about it, shows up in the scene where a citizen is asking Layla if she's an Egyptian superhero, which could be what is used to globally put this out to the world if they want to connect it to the rest of the heroes in the MCU. You know, like this big thing happened in Egypt, but there's heroes here. But that's just a reach. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But here, this is where our favorite characters get their asses kicked. Because Layla's out of the battle. Harrow, like, restrained her. And now, Mark is getting his ass kicked. So, Harrow is, like, above him, which is a really cool shot. Because Harrow is standing above him. We get Mark's POV. And Amit and Khonshu are, like, battling in the background. There's huge monsters, which is awesome. But Mark is getting his ass... Well, I guess Mark and Steven are getting their asses kicked. They're getting their ass kicked. And Harrow is like putting full power into him, and he's like draining him of life. Like he's trying to kill him in this. But then something that I did not expect was gonna happen, and it took a turn where I was like, "Oh God!" But like, it happened, and they made it good. The blackout scene. He blacked out again. Mark blacks out, and it's not Mark, and it's not Steven. He blacks out. He wakes up. And everyone around him is either unconscious or dead. I was worried for a second because it pans away from Mark's face and Harrow is there, like unconscious. I thought he was dead. I thought we were going to see his death and his like fall, like not on screen. I thought they weren't going to show it, which would have been very lazy, and that would have been like really rushed if they just cut out his like death and like Mark like more Moon Knight defeating him. But that's not what happened. He blacks out and Harrow is like he's defeated and he's unconscious. So I wasn't worried about that. It made it better. I thought he was dead, but it's not. He wasn't. Thank God. But he blacks out, and I was like, oh shit. He reassures with Steven that it wasn't him, nor was Steven. So of course they come back with the third identity that still is teased throughout the entire show. It doesn't come up until now, and the post-credit scene, which we'll get into. But my God. Well, actually, I guess his defeat was kind of cut out. That's maybe a little bit of rushing, but I don't think so because they actually gave it a reason because he blacked out, and then Jake Lockley, his third personality, peeked through. At least I think it's Jake Lockley. It should be because Moon Knight doesn't have more than 3 main personalities, or them three identities. But yeah, Jake messes everyone up, and Harrow's defeated. So they're just confused or whatever. But regardless of whatever happened, they're victorious. They're still standing, and Harrow's defeated. It's interesting that they made Jake Lockley such a bloodthirsty and like merciless character. So it is really interesting because I don't think that's the original take on the character, on like the Jake Lockley identity. I don't mind it, obviously. They changed Stephen Grant from a billionaire to a gift shop like cashier or whatever he is. So they made changes for the series and their own iteration of Moon Knight, which I don't mind. I'm still enjoying it, obviously, if you've been watching this, especially if you made it this far. So I'm just saying it's interesting, and I'm really excited to see more of it, and I want to see more content, more Moon Knight stuff being made. But let's go on with it. Next, we have Moon Knight, or Mark, picking up Harrow, and they go back into the chamber, into the pyramid that they're like right next to, and they try to, they bind Amit back. They bound Amit to Harrow, because the gods need, if they can't be imprisoned in stone, because the gods aren't there, and they're all dead, Khonshu let them know that they needed a person, they needed an avatar to bound the god with. So they used Harrow as like the host, I guess, and they bound Amit to Harrow. And then they successfully do that, and we see that also pretty cool, like purple effects, whatever that is on the screen while she's like getting bound, whatever. But it's cool, and it's weird because Harrow gets all freaky, whatever. But this was also a little weird scene, not bad, or I'm not saying it's good either. It was weird seeing that happen to Harrow, but regardless, it happened. And then what happens next is something I'm not really surprised about, because this whole thing, Mark has been questioning himself whether he's a good person or not, and how he's been a killer and a mercenary all of his life. So I wasn't like surprised, or I didn't know if I should have expected it or not, but I wasn't surprised about Mark trying to redeem himself, like this redemption arc kind of thing. He's like, he's not going to kill Harrow for Khonshu, or maybe it's more the lines of that. He doesn't want to serve Khonshu anymore. He realized Khonshu is playing with him. He realized Khonshu was using him for Khonshu's own will and what Khonshu wants done and what he has done in the past. So Mark straight up tells him that, like, I'm not going to do anything for you anymore. You made a deal and let me free. And that's exactly what Khonshu does. They don't kill Harrow. Harrow ends up in an insane asylum or some kind of facility where he's arrested, or he's locked up, or he's stuck in this place. Because it cuts, so we don't really see anything between Amit being bound to him and him being put in an asylum, because it cuts. But he tells Khonshu he's not doing his deeds anymore. He's not doing what Khonshu makes him do anymore. He's not going to be Khonshu's toy no longer. And Khonshu realizes, and he agrees. And then we see the Moon Knight suit is gone, and Khonshu lets Mark go. He frees Mark of their deal. And that deal ending forces Mark to get rid of the Moon Knight suit. Obviously not by himself, but it just comes off of him, and that creates a white flash that transitions to the next scene in the all-white asylum. And if we take what we said last episode about the asylum being the inner mechanisms of Mark's mind, trying to make like a grounded sense of it all, this basically means that he's like fully done with Harrow, and he's accepted himself. Like, there's no more reason to separate sense from nonsense when he accepted himself, and now he's living in his own peace, his own sense of peace and harmony. He doesn't need to make sense of it all anymore. He knows what's real and what's fake. He's accepted it. He's accepted this, and this is him denying Harrow's diagnosis, as he says himself in the episode. This was another thing that I was like, oh no. The scene was good. It ended up well. But in my mind, I was like, oh, wait. Because it was a good bit that the episode was running on for, and I knew it was about 40 minutes long. I wasn't sure how close to the ending I was. So I thought maybe a small chance that they could have made it was all in his head or something like that, and that was him waking up from it. But it wasn't. It was still in his head, thankfully. But it wasn't like that. And I think that thing that I just said about him being free of not only Khonshu, but free of Harrow, and free of having to deal with this asylum and like inner mechanisms of his mind being all out of place, is what happened. So I do think that is what happened, and I think that is what like went down in that scene. And then Steven comes in like late as Gators or whatever, and he goes back, and I thought the episode was gonna end. Like, I did not know how long I was in for it, because again, I knew it was going on for a good amount of time now. I was watching it, and I thought it was gonna end like 3 times, but it didn't until it actually ended. But next we have, after that, he says late as Gators, whatever he says. Mark wakes up back in his apartment, in his loft, which was interesting, which is weird. Because it felt like, I don't even know what it felt like. It was weird, because like automatically woke up just like the start of the series. So I was like, is it supposed to be like it wasn't in his head again? But it wasn't, thankfully. I would have hated that if it did like all in his head type of motif for this show. Thankfully it's not. But he woke up in his loft, and I know this is not like it wasn't in his head or anything, because there's 2 goldfish this time. There's other things that are there that happened in the show in like previous episodes, so there's no worry about that. But then Mark is talking to Steven, and that again is not in his head. He's literally talking to Steven, and Steven's talking back to him. And then he falls, trips, and face palms on the floor. And then episode ends. And that is the end of episode 6. Or so we thought. Screen goes black. This time it's not a blackout. It's just the credits. The credits roll for a bit. And, of course, it's a finale of an MCU show. So, of course, I stay for the credits. And, to my surprise, there actually was. Well, I wasn't really surprised. But there was something that would tease what's upcoming. But this credit scene was not... It was less than a teaser than it was a scene. It felt more like a conclusion, because it really does conclude the story of this particular show. Yes, it teases what could be more if they return to Moon Knight and the character of Moon Knight, but it does really conclude the show and the story going on. You want to know how? Because, well, we have our protagonist and our antagonist. Mark has been freed of Khonshu. He's done with it. The deal is over, and now he could live by himself, and he could live his life peacefully with no Khonshu. Antagonist, on the other hand, we don't know what happened to him after the bounding of Amit, but we ended up learning that he ended up in a asylum of his own, which is pretty funny, considering he was the doctor in Mark's mind. But he's in there, and then he's taken out, wheeled out, and if you've seen the episode, we all know where it ends up. He loses his life in the back of a limo. And not only does that limo have Khonshu in it, in a suit, by the way, so that's straight out of the comics. Khonshu sitting in a suit with his hands folded up, exactly how it is in the show. But the driver of the limo was someone that we were waiting for a while to see. I cannot tell you, I was so excited to see this, because, well, if you've seen the episode, you know what I'm talking about. It wraps the story up, because we learned what happens with Harrow and Mark's, the end of it. That's the conclusion. It's a conclusion. That's what it is. But the credit scene, Harrow is shot dead by the driver, none other than Mark Spector. Wait, Mark Spector? No. Stephen Grant? No. He is shot dead by Jake Lockley, the third personality that we've been waiting to see for so long now. I kind of got adjusted to it and kind of loved how they didn't show it until the very end. They kept it ominous and mysterious throughout the entire show over and over again. I thought he was going to make an appearance. Well, he does, but I thought in like the episode, not the credit scene. But Khonshu says how Mark doesn't really know how troubled he is, and that he still has Mark on a string. Mark doesn't know it. Mark nor Steven knows that they're still doing Khonshu's bidding, but because it's the third personality. It's not either of them, it's Jake Lockley, Mark Spector's third personality. I covered Jake Lockley in a video before you watch Moon Knight. He's part of a character. Moon Knight, Mr. Knight, Stephen Grant, Mark Spector, Jake Lockley. Those are the main components of the character of Moon Knight. And here we finally have Jake Lockley. Like I said, it's interesting that they made him so merciless and like so ruthless, But, you know, they had adjusted to however they wanted to do it. It's their show and it's their cinematic universe. So let it be. I think it's good, and I'm enjoying it regardless. But, oh my god, this scene was so cool. Hera ended up getting arrested or put in a mental institution or whatever happened to him, but he's dead now. Khonshu wanted him dead. Mark wouldn't do it because he said he wouldn't kill him. He tossed the crescent blade over to the side and told Khonshu, if you want to kill him, you do it yourself. And then later on, after the deal's over and ended, we see that Khonshu got what thought to be Mark, not really. He got Mark's body back and is using Jake as his puppet. And I guess Jake is his avatar now, since Jake can see him and hear him and etc. But Jake Lockley was a thing that they've been building up for a while now, and it's probably going to be what pushes them to do more Moon Knight content, hopefully. And I hope we see it soon, or at least announced soon. I think it's going to. There's no reason not to. The show's doing good, and it's a great show. Probably the best MCU show, or at least my favorite one that I've seen. But Jake Lockley has been a sight that we've been wanting to see for a while now, and we finally see him. Not only that, we see Jake Lockley, we see Khonshu in a suit, which is cool, and even past that is another thing, and it's the limousine themed after the moon. The license plate even has Spectre on it, just like the comics. I'll put a picture up on the screen if it's not up already. And oh my god, I had a big smile ear to ear on my face when I was watching the scene. Not only we saw Khonshu in the suit, we met Jake Lockley finally. They even dropped the name Jake Lockley, Khonshu did, and the whole scene was just good. And it concludes the story. We know what happens with Mark, and we know what happened with Hera. So there's no more to that. And we know what happened with Khonshu. But after that, we don't know. And we'll have to wait to see if they push more content out afterwards. But my god, man, that scene got me thrilled. I'm pretty sure I got a hard on watching that. I don't know. But, whew, I loved it. Not only this episode, but this finale. The entire show was beautiful. I loved this show so much, and I'm sad to say that it's ending, it has ended, and it's over now. But I think I got everything I wanted to talk about out. This was the finale of Moon Knight, and this was Moon Knight as the show. This is probably the last video on the episodes I want to make. Moon Knight as entirely, as a whole, probably not. But we'll see. But this has been Moon Knight. A show that I really adored. I loved this show. I loved the character. I knew a good amount of information about him beforehand. Before going into the show. A lot of things I already knew. So I would know is going to show up coming into the show. And seeing how it was executed was really interesting. And was really something I wanted to see done. And I think they did it really good. I think it ended up really well. And I'm proud to say that Moon Knight is now in the MCU, and I'm proud to say Moon Knight has his own show and that he's even more popular than before. But just like every other moon, the moon comes up and the moon goes back down. And hopefully Moon Knight will rise again. But that has been Moon Knight. I have been Ghostie. Well, I still am Ghostie. At least I think so. I don't have any alters yet. But this has been Ghostie, and that is my thoughts about Moon Knight. Thank you for joining and showing the love for Moon Knight, especially the same love that I have been giving it. And I appreciate it greatly. If you watch any of the videos, you watch this, made it this far, or anything, I appreciate it greatly. Much love. Thank you again. And this has been Ghostie, but this time I don't bid farewell. Later, Gators.